clock is ticking, and we are less than 10 days out for kickoff for the Washington football team. On September 12th, which would be next weekend, team is kicking off against the Los Angeles Chargers at home. All eyes are set on that matchup. It doesn't feel like we'll be getting a lot more of roster moves like we thought in the upcoming days. It feels like we're transitioning into the game prep period. But, we'll have a lot to break down then, but we decided before the season gets underway, why not pin ourselves to some record predictions? This is the Burgundy and Gold Review. My name is Jess of HCTR.nation on Instagram, joined with Sam of WSH Football 365, of course. Sam, we got an 18-week season ahead of us. Let's get into some record predictions that might or might not age well in a couple months.
We will have to see. Everybody's an expert before the season starts, but as we all know, many things that are expected can come to change as soon as the ball starts flying through the air. Every year the schedule comes out, people ask for my record prediction. I don't ever really feel comfortable giving that until after the roster is quote-unquote set. So what a perfect opportunity for us to do a little bonus pod in this little mini bye week that we have before week one, Jess. So let's start out with the Chargers. Washington hosts the Chargers of L.A., Sunday, September 12th, 1 o'clock at FedEx Field. Chargers are a pretty darn good team. Justin Herbert obviously highlights them as a young star quarterback. They have guys like Austin Eckler, Bosa, Keenan Allen. It's definitely going to be a tough matchup. What are your thoughts on this one, Jess?
Well, the Chargers, I was checking out the roster, very well-built team. I think their biggest issues last year, which kept them from being a legit team, because they got a legit season from Justin Herbert, that's for sure, but coaching an offensive line, which they definitely addressed this year. Brandon Staley will be coaching his first game against us. I think he was a pretty good coaching hire. Obviously coached the number one defense statistically in the league last year in the Los Angeles Rams. Not too much removed for him. And then they definitely upgraded the offensive line, signing, Corey Linsley in free agency, Rashawn Slater in the draft. So not really a team with many weaknesses. I think looking at this game, I think it's a bit of a toss-up. I can see a scenario where both Washington comes out and gets a good win against them. I can see a scenario where the Chargers start off a good year with a win against Washington. An interesting I'm tripping over myself. An interesting statistic I saw a few weeks ago is that Ron Rivera's week one defenses allow 15.6 points per game, if I'm correct. That is a pretty good number, just going off that. Assuming Washington comes out strong like we saw last year against the Eagles, I think there's a possibility they can really make a statement. I'm glad that it opens up against home. We've got a West Coast team coming out, starting a bit earlier for them. It's week one, so I don't know how much that implicates into things, but maybe it's the cautious optimism in me. I'll say a 23-17 victory here. Like I said, I can see this one going either way. I'm just really banking on the fact the team is very prepared. They're healthy at the moment. I think the Chargers, their defense is switching from a 4-3 to a 3-4. Obviously, that's not, a major thing in the NFL nowadays, since base formations aren't as relied upon as they used to be. But there could be some growing pains, whether it be, first coaching staff, first coaching game, new players gelling. The offensive line doesn't have chemistry yet because they haven't played together. But Washington is a pretty cohesive unit at the moment. I just think defense has a strong showing and offense gets enough done, which might be the theme for the year. And I think start off 1-0.
Yeah, I think this will be a highlight or showcase rather of two teams that are young and have bright futures. As you stated, the offensive line was, I believe, last, if not very close to last in rankings in the league last year. They do have an entirely new, not entirely new, but a darn close to entirely new offensive line. So there's going to be an improvement there. I'm going to go ahead and agree with you and give the team a W on this one. The statistic that you pulled up about Ron Rivera's week one defenses is nothing to shy away from, and I think that we might see something similar again this year. I'm going to go ahead and give Washington a victory here, really close, edge one out at 21-20. Start the season 1-0 as well.
So we both got Washington staying at 1-0 as they then move into week two, hosting the New York Football Giants. Frustrating matchup, I would say, especially in recent history. Giants are currently riding a 5-game win streak against Washington, going back to 2018, have not beat these guys since the Adrian Peterson touchdown when Alex Smith was handing off the ball. So it's been a little while since we got our last victory against the Giants. got swept by them last year, but I think most Washington fans can agree that was more in large part to Washington having way too many turnovers or giving up way too many missed opportunities in both those games. I believe the statistic was that the Giants won those two games by a combined 5 points, and Washington, I want to say it's 7 turnovers between the two of those games. I'm not thinking we're going to see a disastrous offensive showing this go around. No Alex Smith, 3 interceptions. No Kyle Allen, 2 defensive touchdowns given up. I still think it's going to be a competitive game. The Giants do seem to have our number, but I just really don't like the Giants. I really don't want to. I'm picking Washington to win 20-13 at home. Obviously, it's a short week for them, but it's a short week for the Giants too, and Washington doesn't have to travel. I just think the Giants are getting too lucky with us recently, and that luck will run out week 2. I have Washington moving to 2-0 to start the year.
I also have Washington moving to 2-0, but I also have this as Washington's first blowout win of the season. I have Washington winning 37-15, and the Giants not even scoring a single touchdown. Every single point will be on field goals. I don't know if you heard reports out of their camp, but their offensive line is so weak and so not deep, shallow rather, that they had their own coaches taking snaps in practice, which I don't even know if that's legal. Our defensive line up against that offensive line, I don't even need to say what the damage that would be done. They did recently make a couple trades to bring some guys in. I believe one guy came from the Ravens, another guy from elsewhere, but I just can't see their scrap heap offensive line being able to handle this elite defensive unit that I believe that they're going to put on the field this year. So yeah, I have Washington improving to 2-0 with a blowout win of the Giants on Thursday night.
So we've got a little bit varying perspectives on how Washington gets this victory. I think every Washington fan would love smacking the life out of the Giants. I mean, I am tired of their fan base. I am tired of listening to crap on Twitter, in real life. Just any Giants fans I know in my comment sections, it is tiring. I do not like the Giants, but I mean, I'm hoping that happens, but I've just seen like too many close games of them that Washington should be winning bigger. Do you know what I mean?
For sure, for sure. But this is going to be the year we turn that stuff around, right? I really believe that. So heading into week 3, the Washington football team travels up to Buffalo, where they take on Josh Allen and the Bills. The Bills coming off an AFC championship berth last year. Got a great young quarterback, just got paid in Josh Allen. Amazing wide receiver in Stephon Diggs. This team is a perennial Super Bowl contender, and I think the biggest test so far in the young season for the Washington football team. I have them traveling up to Buffalo and getting the first loss of the season. I think they're going to lose by the hand of the Buffalo Bills, 27-20. Just going to be too much offensive power, too much experience, I think, for the team. It'll be a good learning experience, and I think they'll come out, a more hardened unit, but I don't think that they're quite on the level that Buffalo is right now. I think they're still a year or two off from being able to compete at that level. So I have Washington falling to 2-1 after week 3 with a 27-20 loss to the Buffalo Bills.
You know, I'm glad this game is not being played in the November, December months of the year. I think that the fact that it's in Buffalo in warm weather does give an opportunity for Washington to play some potential spoiler early on for Buffalo. But like you mentioned, the Bills have a great roster, great coaching staff, great quarterback. They have the 3 main things you're looking for in a good team. Josh Allen, top 3 to 5 quarterback. I mean, he's an absolute stud, possible league MVP last year. But I agree. I think just the Bills are too good for Washington at this moment. I don't think Washington necessarily has the offense to keep up with the Bills' offense. Obviously, our defense will, be a good competition for them, get to see them against one of the better offenses in the league. So I'll be interested to see how Jack Del Rio and company, I guess, strategize for that game, see what kind of stuff we throw at them. I think it's possible we can beat the Bills. I don't think there's no team's unbeatable, but I just think early on, I think just that's too much of an ask for the team right now to beat Buffalo at Buffalo too. That's a tough place to play, as always. So I have Washington losing that game 31-21. Little bit of a shootout with the offense tapering off at the end, I think is what's going to happen. And I have Washington dropping to 2-1 on the year there.
Rolling into week 4, Washington travels down to Atlanta to take on the rebuilding Falcons. I think this could be somewhat of a trap game, to be honest. Atlanta still has a lot of really good talent on the offensive side of the ball between Matt Ryan, rookie Kyle Pitts, Calvin Ridley, to name a few. I don't think they are going to be the team that we saw, a few years ago when they went to the Super Bowl, obviously, but I think if the team goes down there coming off another road trip and doesn't take this one seriously, they could, easily find themselves in a trap. However, I don't believe that will happen, and I think they will come out of the Bills game with a chip on their shoulder, go down to Atlanta and do their job against the Falcons. I think they come away with a victory, improving to 3-1. I'm going to talk this one up to 27-14 Washington football team.
I think the Falcons have a great offense. I mean, Calvin Ridley, probably going to have a phenomenal year. Kyle Pitts, one of the best players in the draft last year. Hayden Hurst, solid tight end. Matt Ryan is still a good quarterback who could be playing for us in 2022. Who knows? But yeah, so the Falcons still have a good amount of talent on offense to keep up with most teams in the league. Problem is, I was looking at their defense, and there's not much to be impressed with. I mean, I think Washington's offense has a good opportunity here to kind of figure some things out, against a bottom of the pack defense in the league. I've Washington kind of in a little bit of a shootout here with some late touchdowns by the Falcons. I think I've them winning 28-24. I think the game will be a bit more of a widespread victory for Washington than the score indicates. But yeah, trap game, I can see it, but I am just not really picking the Falcons to be a good team this year. I think this is a good opportunity for Washington to kind of get some good momentum heading into a very tough stretch early on in the season. And I think this is a big one. I mean, if Washington, lose to the Bills, you really want to be moving into this upcoming stretch at 3-1, and that's what I have them right now with a 28-24 victory.
We both have the Washington football team sitting at 3-1 after the first quarter of the season, heading into a week 5 matchup against the Drew Brees-less New Orleans Saints. Now piloted by Jameis Winston, former first-round pick, seems to have grown a lot in maturity sitting behind Drew Brees. Got a guy, Michael Thomas, unsure if he's going to be playing or not, or if he'll even be playing for the Saints at that point. A lot of stuff going on with that guy between injury and Twitter drama. Then you have the stud Alvin Kamara, who's always, I think, going to be a constant in that offense. This one was kind of a tough one to gauge for me because we really don't know where the Saints are going to be. The roster itself looks like, the Saints roster every year minus Drew Brees, but you don't really know what you're going to get from Jameis Winston. I personally believe Jameis is going to do just fine. I don't think they're going to be as good as they used to be, obviously, with the Hall of Fame quarterback under the center. But I think Washington goes in and loses a close one at home to the Saints, dropping the record to 3-2. I think they drop this one 23-17. And I think they might just get outcoached a little bit by Sean Payton. Like I said, this one was really hard for me to gauge. But I'm just going to say I'm gonna give them an L for this week.
I have a very similar line of thought here too. I mean, obviously you're exchanging Jameis Winston for Drew Brees here. A lot of questions going on with the Saints. I do believe Michael Thomas will not be playing because I think due to PUP rules, he's out the first 6 weeks of the season. Since this is week 5, we will not be having to see him. But Washington's obviously different coaching staff, completely different rosters. But since that walloping of the Saints in 2015, we've had some tough games against the Saints recently. 2017, when they lost in spectacular, terrible fashion when they were up 31-17 with 4 minutes left to lose 34-31. And then in 2018 when Drew Brees just was playing 9-on-7 football and there was no defensive backs on the field, and we lost 43 to something in a terrible game there too. So first time playing the Saints in a little bit here. I think the Saints are still going to be a solid team. I mean, not that Drew Brees the past few years was anything to write home about. I think you might even be getting an upgrade in Jameis Winston here. But, yeah, I just think that the Saints are a tough team. I mean, Sean Payton, obviously different times past, but Sean Payton's coached against Ron Rivera before. Those are always the kind of 2 teams in the NFC South for that early 2010 stretch. I have Washington losing a close one here too, 21-17. Just like you said, I don't really know what to gauge the Saints. I'm assuming they're still going to be a solid, well-coached team that has plenty of talent on their roster. And, yeah, I just think they get Washington here. 21-17 loss, dropped to 3-2 on the season for me. So we're both at the same record here.
Same record, 3-2, going into a home game against the Kansas City Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, Tyreek Hill, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. The list goes on. I wish I could predict an upset, here and not drop 3 out of the last 4 games, but it's the Kansas City Chiefs, and I just can't do that. Don't really think I need to talk too much about that. I think they put up a valiant effort as they will do with every team. I will say this: I don't think this team will get blown out by any. You will not see a blowout of the Washington football team this year, unless there's like an insane amount of injuries. I just cannot see that happening. But I think they lose another one. Just too hard to hold off this team. They drop one 28-20 to the Kansas City Chiefs, dropping the record to 3-3.
We're on the same wavelength here. We're getting similar score predictions. I have a 30-20 loss for Washington here. Chiefs are just too good. I mean, it would be great if Washington beat the Chiefs. I would be ecstatic. It'd say a lot about the team. But I mean, this is a team that has less than five losses in probably the last 3 years. I mean, they are the gold standard of what an NFL franchise is right now. They have elite coaching. They have the best quarterback play we've seen in a while in Patrick Mahomes. They've got Travis Kelce, who seems unstoppable week in, week out. They've got still a pretty solid defense that can hold things over. Good pass rush. I haven't even mentioned Tyreek Hill or Clyde Edwards-Helaire at this point. I just think the Chiefs are too good, and Washington isn't that low of a team at this point. I mean, there is a possibility that, they match well and the Chiefs have an off game, and Washington can get them on that off game, and maybe the pass rush just lights the world on fire, but the Chiefs have a great offensive line now. They absolutely rehauled that unit in the offseason. I mean, they look nearly unstoppable on paper, and Washington just isn't that low of a team. I mean, you're going to play teams that you're not better than at some points, and you're not going to win all those games or upset every team. So I've got a 30-20 loss here. Washington at 3-3. Sam and I have predicted the same results in 6 weeks into the season at this point, with a team moving on to Week 7 at the Packers in Green Bay. Sam, you want to take this one?
Washington's always played Green Bay tough. They beat them a couple years ago. Paul Richardson had that one of his few touchdowns with us from Alex Smith. A year later they played them. I believe Dwayne Haskins was starting. Lost, obviously, but it wasn't a terrible effort. One of the better efforts of the 2019 season, I believe. But I think that Washington gets back on track here. Walks into Lambeau and shuts Aaron Rodgers down a little bit. Not completely. I think, he'll still do his thing, but I think Washington pulls away a squeaker here, 27-24 in Lambeau. Can't say enough about Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams, Aaron Jones. They're amazing athletes. Aaron Rodgers is my favorite quarterback to ever play the game. Can't wait to see him in Burgundy Gold next year. I digress. I just think that the two losses in a row is going to put a big chip on the shoulder of this team, especially to two teams like the Saints and the Chiefs. And Washington's going to want to turn around and prove that hey, they're no laughing matter. We're not just going to get walked on. And I think they go in and they beat a good team in Lambeau in the Packers and improve their record to 4-3.
First time we're going to disagree here. I just have a hard time. I mean, obviously, you're completely right. Washington has played some good games against the Packers in recent years. Had that 2016 blowout against them on Sunday Night Football. Had that 2018 game where Adrian Peterson went crazy. Defensive line was eating Aaron Rodgers alive. Had the 2019 game where Haskins was playing injured, and I think we only lost by less than a touchdown, I want to say, that game, and that was a pitiful 2019 team. So, obviously, in recent history, Washington somewhat has the Packers number a little bit or is able to keep competitive with them. I just have a hard time picking against Aaron Rodgers. I mean, the QB difference between Rodgers and Fitzpatrick is not this isn't even an indictment of Fitzpatrick. This is just me praising the Packers here, and that during the regular season, the Packers are a machine. They have gone 13-3 year after year. I just don't know if Washington is the team that beats them here. I have a little early season skid for Washington. Have them losing 24-16. I think the Packers, I think it's going to be buzzing in Lambeau that weekend. They've got their new uniforms. It would be nice to play a little bit of spoiler to that, but just the offensive firepower of Adams and Rodgers and Jones. I mean, Tanyan's still good. You have some other wide receiver depth for Green Bay there. I think they still have a solid enough defense they can cause some problems for Washington's offense. I just think it's a bit too tough to beat Rodgers and Lambeau. I mean, if it was at FedEx, maybe a bit different scenario here, but this could be Rodgers' last dance in Green Bay, and I think that team's going to be firing on all cylinders, have Washington losing 24-16 here, dropping to 3-4 before their Halloween matchup against the Denver Broncos.
A good point, real quick, just before we get off of the Packers game. The Packers did just place their probably the best left tackle in the league, David Bakatari, on the physically unable to perform list, so he won't be back until 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Actually, he might be returning 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Nope, he'll be back the game before. I apologize. I thought we might be going up against their backup left tackle, but if all goes well, they will have their all-pro left tackle back. And that brings us into the Halloween night game, or Halloween afternoon, rather, 4:25 in Denver against the Broncos. I will actually be attending this game. I'm very excited for that. It should be a good time. Broncos, a bit of a question mark. One of those teams kind of similar to us, where they have star defensive front and Bradley Chubb and Von Miller. You have a quarterback in Teddy Bridgewater and Drew Lock, two quarterbacks in Teddy Bridgewater and Drew Lock that are so you really don't know what you're going to get from that team. And I think, the Washington football team is a very similar comparison. I do think that Washington is a better coach team, though, and I do think that Fitzpatrick is far more dynamic than Teddy Bridgewater or Drew Lock. Dynamic with his arm is what I mean. I think Washington goes into Denver and gets another victory here, and a pretty easy one at that. I think they win this one 31-17 in Denver on Halloween.
So I do have Washington stopping their 3-game losing streak in my prediction here. Have a win before the bye week. I mean, like you said, the Broncos are essentially Washington of the AFC. I mean, they've got a really solid defense. Von Miller, Bradley Chubb, you named. They also have a fantastic secondary. Kyle Fuller, Bryce Callahan, Patrick Surtain, Ronald Darby, Justin Simmons. I mean, they've got some good talent on offense with Cortland Sutton and a few other receivers, a couple running backs that you can work with. They just don't really have QB consistency there. And I think, I'd probably take Drew Lock. I'm assuming it's going to be Bridgewater playing this game if he hasn't been benched or any other complications pulled up since then. So I'm assuming the team will be playing against Bridgewater. I do think there's a slight difference in QB between Washington and Denver, both in the Fitzpatrick and Bridgewater thing, and then in coaching, like you mentioned, too, with Fangio and Rivera. I think the Broncos are going to be a tough team. I think this is going to be like similar rosters lining up against each other. I don't think it's as much of a blowout. Like you said, I have a 17-10 victory here in a very gritty defensive filled matchup. And I think that better management and slightly better QB play by Washington will get in the victory as they head into the bye week here. I have Washington sitting at 4-4. Sam, I've not been keeping track of your record. What do you have?
5-3.
So slight difference there. I think as the Packers game we disagreed upon, but Washington has a nice bye week, week 9. I mean, literally right essentially in the middle of the season, week 9 bye in an 18-week season. They just got out of a tough stretch with the Saints, Chiefs, Packers, and Broncos, 4 very tough teams that you would hope to at least try and go 2-2 with. But I think with both our predictions, 5-3 and 4-4, I mean, considering their upcoming slate, that is still manageable to keep them in the hunt essentially for either a wild card spot or division lead.
And for sure, and as we saw last year, this new Washington football team has become somewhat of a second half team. So I'm kind of happy that we get some of these really tough games out of the way before the bye week, and then you have a chance to heal, and then you come back and you play the majority of your divisional games. Because I think that's what's really going to get us our push to the playoffs. We'll have great experience against great teams at the beginning of the year. I think that's going to become invaluable as they come towards the playoffs. But yeah, but as soon as they get out of that bye week, they have one more big tough one, and that is against the Super Bowl champion Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Tom Brady. Everyone knows the story from last year. Taylor Heineke, the legend of Taylor Heineke, if you will, Washington gave the Tampa Bay Buccaneers the best fight of the postseason last year, and I don't want to say they almost beat them. They put themselves in an opportunity where they could have almost beat them, and that's saying something for a team that young. And I think that helped them, like Rivera said, a building block for the future, a building block of experience. That being said, I still think they're going to lose this game. That sucks, but just like you said with Aaron Rodgers, you can't bet against Tom Brady, man. Like you really, I think that's probably the most asinine thing you could do in sports betting is ever bet against Tom Brady, and I'm not going to do that here. I do think they'll put up a great fight, just like they did last year on the same field. But I think Washington again will lose and drop to 5-4 with a 24-17 loss to the Buccaneers.
I think this is going to be a really fun game. I mean, Washington is a healthier team this go round. They're a better team this go round, but the Bucs are the best team in football until proven otherwise. I mean, this is a team that just beyond the playoff game against Washington, just essentially ran through the NFC and then just ran over the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. They return all their starters. They should be the favorites to repeat again. I mean, like I said, I think it's going to be a really fun game. I think we're going to see a really tough fought battle with Washington against Tampa Bay. But Lily, as you said, I just don't like picking against elite quarterbacks. And that's going to continue here. I have Washington losing a 27-23 matchup with the Bucs. It's going to be one hell of a game, but Washington just doesn't have that QB to make me confident picking them against the cream of the crop of the NFL teams. So have Washington dropping to 4-5.
Washington heads down next week, November 21st at 1 p.m. to Charlotte, where they take on the Panthers. Ron Rivera's first time back in Carolina since being fired there in 2019. Another team that's really difficult to gauge. You don't really know what you're going to get from Sam Darnold. They have a whole lot of pieces around them. Christian McCaffrey, Robbie Anderson, to name a few. I think Washington goes, and I think they win. I think they improve their record to 6-4. I don't think this one will be pretty. I think it's going to be a sloppy game, and I think Washington comes out on top 24-16.
The Ron Rivera revenge game, part 2, because we're gonna act like week 17 last year did not, or week 16 did not happen.
Yeah.
That was some bad QB play that Washington had against the Panthers the last time they matched up. And it was still, I mean, even with taking out the QB play, there was way too many mistakes in the field that game. But I know we're kind of going opposites here now. I think Washington, I think this is a game. I mean, I've had them in a tough rut here. They've lost 4 of their last 5 in my predictions. I think this is their first blowout victory of the year. The Panthers are a tough team to gauge. I'm going to be honest, I'm not a believer in Sam Darnold. I mean, he's in a much better situation here, but the Panthers' offensive line is very questionable. I mean, they're starting guys like Cameron Ervin and Pat Elflein, who have flamed out first-round picks elsewhere in the league. I mean, they have an offensive line that is very easy to capitalize on. I mean, their defense has a lot of question marks, too. They're banking on a lot of young guys progressing, so maybe in a few years, the Panthers have a really good defense, but right now they've got a lot of unproven guys beyond guys like Jeremy Chin and Brian Burns. I mean, besides those guys, there's not a ton to really be afraid of on that defense. I mean, the Panthers have some good offensive weapons, but I just think Washington in Carolina, Ron gets his game. I have Washington winning it 34-20 and moving back to 500 at 5-5 on the season. As they then move into I'm not sure if I believe it's a Monday night matchup that they host the Seahawks and at home in FedEx.
Yeah, it's Monday night. Yeah, I have Russell Wilson and company heading down to Washington November 29th. Monday night, I believe that's the first Monday night after Thanksgiving. It's another team that Washington has played tough over the years. I think back in everyone remembers that one highlight play from Josh Doxson down the sidelines that won them the game, I believe, back in 2016. Last year, they lost to him, made a couple mistakes, but were right there, had the opportunity to beat him. I personally believe that Russell Wilson's on the back end of his career, and I think that Washington goes in here and gets another W on prime time, starts to kill all those prime time monkeys off the back from the past where they can't win a damn game when they get on ESPN. I think this time they do it, and I think they do it in a good fashion. I think they come and they beat the Seattle Seahawks by a score of 30-21.
I think this is a similar game to how it went in 2020. I think Washington is with there in Seattle. I mean, Seattle's a very weird team. If you've ever watched any of their games throughout the year, they have their highs and they have their lows, but they win. And I mean, the Seahawks, they haven't really changed that much from last year. I think Washington goes in there. I mean, the big flaws in that game were some first half quarterback struggles by Dwayne Haskins, and then an injured wide receiver room and offensive line that could not get the job done during the second half. And I think both those things, or all three of those things, are different. Washington has phenomenal offensive line depth, so that's hanging in there now. I mean, we've got more receivers to throw to other than an injured Terry McLaurin at that point in the season. And then hopefully Ryan Fitzpatrick is playing good football by week 12 of this year. I think it's going to be a tight one. I mean, Seattle can make plays. Russell's legs really were an issue for the defense last year. I think he rushed for almost 100 yards if I'm correct, but I have Washington, except this go round, winning this game 21-20 in a very close fashion against the Seahawks, going above 500 to 6-5 on the season now.
Washington then travels to Las Vegas, where they take on the Raiders at their new stadium. Looks pretty cool. That's December 5th rather at 4:05 p.m. Don't really know what I'm going to get from the Raiders this year. John Gruden is a wacky dude and kind of just throws a bunch of stuff at a wall and sees what's going to stick. And I'm not sure what's going to stick yet this year. I'm a bigger believer in Derek Carr than most. I think he's a top 10 quarterback without a doubt. But the talent around them is left to be questioned. Although they did just sign Peyton Barber off of our practice squad. Watch out for that. I think Washington goes in here and gets another victory. I hate to be overzealous and say they're going to win this much, but like I honestly think they're going to. I think they're going to go into Las Vegas and they're going to easily handle the Raiders by a score of 28-13.
Okay, we are very close on this one. I have Washington winning 27-13 for a lot of the reasons you mentioned. I don't know what the hell the Raiders are. Like, Derek Carr is a good quarterback. Is their defense going to be good? I don't know. It hasn't been good in a while. Their running game their offense doesn't really sell me. Just, they're a very, 7 to 8 win team for me. And just, they completely overhauled their offensive line. I mean, a good offensive line matchup for Washington here. Their defense feels like it has a lot of flaws. Feels like it's going to be one of the lesser or one of the worst defenses, not the worst, but one of the bottom third defenses in the league. I think Washington, like I said, 27-13 off by 1 point. I just really like how this matches up for them. I mean, it's in Vegas. Hopefully it's a really fun game on our end. Get some good plays there in front of in a great new stadium. But yeah, I just have Washington matching up really well against the Raiders and getting them pretty solid victory, 27-13, to push them up to 7-5 on the season, heading into a Week 14 match. Now, this is where, before we get into this, I just want to say this is where Washington's season will be make or break. We discussed how there's that early week stretch before they head into the bye where they got the Saints, Chiefs, Packers, and Broncos. I think if they're hovering around 500, things are still entirely manageable. But I mean, I don't know if I'm assuming most people listening to this have looked at Washington's schedule at this point, but 5 divisional matchups to close the year. I think that's the first time in at least 30 years that's happened for Washington, if I remember correctly. Yeah, this is where if Washington wants to win the playoff or wants to win the NFC East, wants to make the playoffs, wants to separate themselves from the teams in their division that a lot of us think they're better than, this is where you show it. And it all starts with this Week 14 matchup hosting the Cowboys.
It'll be interesting to see where Dallas is at this point in the season. I will say I do believe that Washington will split with the Cowboys this year. Injuries, all that aside. And I think this is the one game that Washington probably goes in and wins because it's at home. And I think they are pretty evenly matched teams despite besides the quarterback play. I think when healthy, Dak Prescott is one of the better quarterbacks in the league, and he's had a lot of success against Washington in the past. I believe Washington wins a very, very close one against Dallas this time around, 23-21, improving their record to 5-4 or 10-4.
10-4. Damn, that is optimistic so far, I'll say.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I think Cowboys, I mean, Washington fortunately had some very dominant victories against them last year. I think it was combined score of 66-23. I want to say it was that they beat the Cowboys by last year. Great game of Thanksgiving, great game in the rain at FedEx. But Cowboys, I'm assuming, I mean, I can't really project injuries. I'm just going to assume they're playing a relatively healthy Cowboy squad at this point in time, which means they're playing a Zach Martin, they're playing a Dak Prescott. Yeah, I mean, the Cowboys are the main competition for Washington in the East this year. I think they split as well, but I have their loss coming before their victory. Nail biting fashion, 20-17. I just think Cowboys, assuming they're healthy, Washington is not that much better than that's a team they're going to sweep. Obviously, hope they sweep them, but realistically, I think Washington loses this one. I have them sitting at 7-6 at this point.
I have to apologize. I was wrong with my record. I said 10-4. I'm going 9-4. It was one game ahead. And the next game that brings us to is it's either going to be on a Saturday or Sunday. This is a to be determined game in Philadelphia against the Eagles. Gotta see what you're going to get from Jalen Hurts this year. Eagles are. I don't know what the hell the Eagles are either. They're kind of like the Raiders to me, where I kind of don't feel like they have a set direction. Um, I personally do not believe in Jalen Hurts. I think that he benefited from playing in a conference in college where they don't play defense whatsoever. I do think he has leadership qualities that are elite, but that doesn't get your receivers the ball. I think Washington goes into Philadelphia and wins another game. This time it's going to be by the score of 27-19. Now we're at 10-4.
Yeah, I just don't think the Eagles are a good team right now. I mean, it just feels like this year's set up to go bad for them. I mean, in 2022, maybe they'll start turning things around, but I can be completely wrong. It's not like I'm in the loop on Eagles stuff day to day here, but I just don't see them being a good team in 2021. And I think they're the team that Washington is going to sweep in the division. I have a really nice blowout win for Washington here, 34-14. I mean, there's nothing. I mean, they've got a solid offensive line that's deals with injuries a lot, and they've got a pretty good defensive line that I don't think is surrounded by a great defense. So I think Washington is pretty easily able to handle the Eagles here and get a nice 20-point victory, moving on to 8-6 with 3 key games to close out the year.
Sitting at 10-4, Washington moves to Dallas again for the second time in 3 weeks, takes on the Cowboys. I believe that this will be the one that they lose. And I believe it'll be by a score of 27-24.
So we're just flipped here. I have the Cowboys winning at FedEx, and I have Washington winning at Jerry World on Sunday night, have it being a 23-14 victory. I mean, there's 1 week in between these matchups. Not a lot will have likely changed. I just think Washington gets theirs now and comes at a key point in time with the season essentially closing down and this being their final match against the Cowboys. I think they get a good victory here, 23-14, putting them at 9-6 with 2 weeks left in the season.
Second game against the Eagles in 3 weeks coming up next. I be honest, I don't have a whole lot of respect for the Eagles or the Giants this year. I think they beat the Eagles again to improve their record to 11-4 by a score. This is going to be a blowout. This is going to be my blowout game. This will be the last game before Washington rests their starters because they're going to be having the division locked up after they beat the Eagles right here. I believe that'll be the game. They're going to win by a score of 34-10. Philadelphia is just going to be completely ready to be over with the year. Jason Kelce just needs to retire. Everyone knows that. Sirianni is going to get fired right after this game. Washington wins, rests their starters for Week 18.
A lot of extra bold predictions you tossed in there. I'll say Philadelphia is a bit more competitive in this matchup than they are in the first one. Not saying they win by any means, but I think Washington doesn't get as astounding a victory. I think this one they might come out a little slow in after a really emotional victory, or not when I say emotional, but a really strong victory against the Cowboys the week before. I think they might come out a bit flat to start this one, then pick it up late. I think Washington wins this one 21-10, putting them at 10-6 with Week 18 on the horizon. And for my predictions, I didn't predict the Cowboys or Giant seasons here, so I'm not sure if Washington would have won the division by this point, but a crucial matchup against the Giants to close the year nonetheless.
A crucial matchup, and I'm going to throw in another crazy prediction, will be Daniel Jones' last game as an NFL starting quarterback. Washington wins this game to complete their sweep of the Giants by a score of 27-14, improving their record on the season to 12-5. Good for first place in the NFC East.
Now, this might just be my Giants paranoia of losing to them again, or just traumatic history of having to see Washington blow game after game to them in recent years. But, I mean, I think Daniel Jones is not a good quarterback, which is coming from the team that he's 5-0 against, or 4-0 against. That just frustrates me very much. But I still think the Giants have a solid roster outside of Jones. I mean, I'm assuming at this point, I can't really, like I said it with the Cowboys matchups, I'm just banking on these teams being relatively healthy at this point in time. Obviously, injuries are going to happen, but it's kind of hard to predict a team to be injured by a certain point in time. So I just think it's going to be 2 close games against the Giants this year. And I think this game is the exact same score as the last one, 20-13, except I think it goes in the Giants' favor this go round. But I think, that puts Washington at 10-7 for me, so a little bit below your prediction. But I think Washington going 4-2, and that victory against the Cowboys to close the year, I'm going to predict NFC East for them, but not as confidently as you, Sam.
Don't get me wrong, this is just a prediction, and I'm maybe being a little overconfident. If we redo this after week 1, I'm sure it'd be a lot different in either direction. I could definitely see 1, 2, 3, 4 games getting skewed either way, but I definitely think this is a cusp playoff team that has the potential to win playoff games, and it'll ride and die on a quarterback play and injuries, as it seems to do every year. But this team's getting deeper. Coaching is great. Team players are buying into it. They seem like I constantly say this term, and it's always brought up. But they seem to have a culture now, a culture that's sustainable for winning, and it's nice to watch them build on that. And I'm really excited to get into this season, whether they go 12-5 or not, because I definitely think that there's something to be excited for with the future. That's all we have for you this week, guys, and thank you so much for tuning in. If you like what you hear, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube and follow us on all platforms where you can find podcasts. I'm Sam of WSH Football 365, and that's Jess of HDTR.Nation. Please tune in next week where we'll come and do 2 pods per week, 1 pregame and 1 postgame, so you can have all the information on the Washington football team through all 18 weeks of the season. Thank you so much, and go football team.